crystal chandelier glitters above, its light fracturing across the mahogany table, but my blood runs cold as Maxwell Blackwood's voice slices through the murmurs of his wealthy guests, branding me street garbage in a borrowed dress. My name is Jacqueline Miller, 30 years old, a barista chasing a graphic design degree, and I never imagined I'd be clutching my boyfriend Alexander's hand under a billionaire's scrutiny, his cruel words echoing in a room frozen with shock. My cheeks burn, but something stirs inside me, a spark of defiance that will change everything. I'm standing in this moment, but my mind drifts back to where it all began, to the small coffee shop on Maple Street in Boston, where the scent of roasted beans and the hum of morning chatter first brought Alexander Blackwood into my life. The memory feels like a warm ember against the chill of this dining room, but it also carries the weight of a looming storm, one that will test my heart and my resolve. 7 months ago, I was wiping down counters at the cafe, my apron stained with espresso, my dreams of becoming a graphic designer tucked into late-night study sessions. Every morning at 7:30, Alexander would walk in, his tailored suit a quiet nod to wealth, but his kind blue eyes and polite please and thank you set him apart from the other executives who barely glanced up from their phones. He'd order a black coffee with 1 sugar, sit by the window, and tap away on his laptop. Unlike the others, he noticed me. Really noticed me. "You must really like our coffee," I teased one morning, 3 weeks into his routine. His smile crinkled those blue eyes. "It's good coffee, but I also enjoy the atmosphere and the service." His gaze lingered, and my cheeks flushed, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I learned his name when I called it for his order. Alexander Blackwood. He started lingering longer, asking about my life during my breaks. I shared how I grew up in Millfield, Ohio, raised by a single mom who juggled 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I moved to Boston with big dreams, working full-time to afford night classes, never mentioning the times I chose between textbooks and electricity bills. "That takes incredible determination," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "Most people I know had everything handed to them, myself included, if I'm honest." That was my first hint of his wealth, though he never flaunted it. His watch was sleek but understated, his car nice but not ostentatious. After a month of coffee counter chats, he asked me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant, nothing too fancy, but a world away from my budget. Our conversation flowed effortlessly. Art, literature, his work in the investment division of Blackwood Industries, a company he described with a mix of duty and restlessness. "I'd rather start something of my own someday," he said, "something that makes a difference." I nodded, unaware then that Blackwood Industries was his father's empire, a name splashed across business magazines. That night, after we talked until the restaurant closed, I looked up his family and felt my stomach drop. Alexander was the son of Maxwell Blackwood, billionaire industrialist. I nearly canceled our second date, convinced our worlds were too far apart, but his warm voice on the phone the next day melted my doubts. "I had such a great time, Jacqueline," he said, sincere and unpretentious. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see him again, and our connection deepened, a fragile bridge between my modest life and his world of privilege. Over the next 6 months, Alexander made me feel valued in ways I hadn't expected. He was as happy at my favorite diner as at upscale bistros, poring over my design portfolio with genuine interest. "You have real talent," he'd say, his encouragement a lifeline to my dreams. When he told me he loved me walking along the Charles River at sunset, his words were simple, heartfelt, no grand gestures needed. I loved him too, for his kindness, his integrity, not his name or wealth. But our differences surfaced in small ways. His casual mention of skiing in the Alps, his surprise at my excitement over a $50 work bonus. He listened, learned, never making me feel less. We existed in a bubble, separate from his family's world, and I began to hope our differences wouldn't matter. That hope carried me until a rainy Tuesday evening when Alexander paused our movie night on my worn sofa. "My grandparents' 60th anniversary is next month," he said, tracing patterns on my arm. "There's a formal dinner at the family estate. I want you to come." My fork froze. Meet his entire family? The weight of that invitation settled like a stone, hinting at the storm waiting to break over us. The invitation hung in the air like a challenge, but as I set down my takeout fork, Alexander's hopeful eyes pulled me in, even as anxiety twisted in my gut. "About 30 guests," he explained. "Family, close friends, a few business associates." It sounded overwhelming, a glimpse into a world I'd only seen in movies, but his squeeze of my hand and promise that they'd love me chipped away at my fears. For the next 3 weeks, I obsessed over every detail, from what to wear to how to navigate conversations without embarrassing myself. My best friend Sophia joined me on shopping trips, but the prices of formal gowns made my head spin. $400 for something I'd wear once was half my rent. "You need a killer dress," she insisted, and when I balked at the costs, she offered her midnight blue silk gown from her cousin's wedding, complete with pearl earrings. "Of course you can borrow it," she said, hugging me tight. "You'll look stunning." I practiced walking in heels around my tiny apartment, watched videos on dining etiquette to memorize utensil rules, and even researched Blackwood Industries' history to hold my own in talks about their shipping empire and investments. My sister Elaine called the night before, her voice steady over the phone. "Just remember who you are," she said. "Smart, kind, worthy of respect, no matter the money in the room." I clung to those words as I got ready the next evening, curling my hair with extra care, applying makeup that enhanced without overwhelming. The borrowed dress hugged my figure perfectly, the silk flowing like water, and the pearls added a touch of elegance that made me feel almost like I belonged. When Alexander arrived in a sleek black sedan with a chauffeur, a step up from his usual modest car, his jaw dropped. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, his kiss soft and reassuring. As we settled into the leather seats, he sensed my jitters. "They're just people, Jacqueline," he said, lacing his fingers with mine. "Wealthy, yes, but with their own flaws." The drive wound through upscale neighborhoods, the houses growing grander until we turned onto a private road flanked by ancient oaks. The Blackwood estate emerged like a fairy tale castle, its stone facade lit by soft floods, gardens manicured to perfection, valets waiting in the circular drive. "You grew up here?" I whispered, awe mixing with intimidation. He nodded, a sheepish smile crossing his face. "Home sweet home, ready?" I took a deep breath, echoing Elaine's advice in my mind. I was worthy, and stepped out as the massive double doors swung open to reveal a foyer that stole my breath. The crystal chandelier was enormous, hanging from a ceiling frescoed with clouds and cherubs, marble floors gleaming underfoot, the air scented with fresh lilies and subtle perfumes. Staff glided about, taking coats and offering champagne flutes on silver trays. I accepted one, the cool glass steadying my hands. "Alexander, darling," an elegant woman in her 50s approached, her silver blonde hair in a flawless chignon. She air-kissed his cheeks before turning her cool gaze to me. "Mother, this is Jacqueline Miller," Alexander introduced, his hand warm on my back. "Jacqueline, my mother, Evelyn Blackwood." I extended my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you for including me." Her handshake was brief. "Of course, Alexander has mentioned you." The word mentioned carried a subtle edge like I was a footnote. "What a lovely dress, such an interesting color for spring." Before I could respond to the veiled critique, a younger woman bounced over, her smile bright and genuine. "Finally. I've been dying to meet the woman who got my brother to ditch those insufferable socialites." She hugged me warmly. "I'm Victoria, the cooler Blackwood sibling." Alexander chuckled. "Vic lacks mother's subtlety." Victoria linked arms with me. "Come on, I'll introduce you to the fun ones." As we wove through the crowd, I felt eyes appraising me. The subtle nods, the whispered exchanges. She presented me to cousins, aunts, business friends, most polite but reserved. "What do you do?" an older woman in diamonds asked. "I'm a barista at Maple Street Cafe, finishing my graphic design degree," I replied honestly. "How quaint," she said, smile tight. "A barista, how did you meet Alexander?" Each retelling of our coffee shop story drew raised brows, thin smiles, the judgment hanging like smoke. "I love rags to riches tales," one woman gushed, treating me like a novel character. "Alexander's always had a charitable heart," another murmured, just audible. Victoria squeezed my arm. "Ignore them, they're jealous you have personality and don't bleed blue." We reached Alexander's grandparents, Henry and Eleanor, the evening's honorees. They surprised me with warmth. "You're the one putting that real smile on our grandson's face," Henry said, clasping my hand. "Wonderful to meet you." Eleanor added. Alexander says you're studying design. I'd love to hear about your projects. Their kindness was a balm, but Victoria whispered, Grandpa and Grandma built this from nothing. They're the best. The rest just won the genetic lottery. As the evening wore on, I had a few genuine chats, a cousin into art history, an aunt sharing travel stories, a business partner curious about design. But for every warm exchange, others probed my accent, my education, my family, searching for flaws. Alexander stayed close, deflecting sharp questions, his presence a shield. Then he nodded across the room. There's my father. Maxwell Blackwood held court, tall and imposing, his gray hair steel-like, eyes cold versions of Alexander's warm ones. Should we say hello? I asked, instinct screaming no. Alexander hesitated. He can be abrupt. Don't take it personally. We approached as he wrapped a stock discussion. His gaze swept me dismissively. Father, meet Jacqueline Miller, Alexander said. Maxwell's handshake was crushing. Indeed, that single word dripped dismissal. A staff announcement for dinner saved us. But as we headed to the dining room, Maxwell's cold stare followed, a promise of trouble brewing like dark clouds on the horizon. The dining room unfolded before us like a scene from another era, its massive mahogany table gleaming under yet another chandelier, set with silver that sparkled like stars, fine china etched with delicate patterns, and crystal glasses waiting to catch the candlelight. Flower arrangements in soft pastels dotted the length, creating an illusion of warmth in the vast space, but my stomach nodded as a staff member guided us to our seats. Assigned places. How formal, how calculated. My heart sank when I saw the name cards. I was directly across from Maxwell Blackwood, with Alexander to my right, close enough to feel the heat of his support, but exposed to his father's piercing stare. Victoria, seated further down, caught my eye and flashed a discreet thumbs up, her grin a small beacon in the sea of reserved faces. Quite the production, isn't it? Alexander whispered, pulling out my chair with a gentlemanly flourish. Just remember, only 20 courses and 16 forks. My eyes widened in panic until his soft laugh broke through. Kidding, it's a normal dinner, but with wine that could fund a small country. I managed a weak smile, settling into the plush seat, the borrowed silk of my dress whispering against the upholstery. As guests filed in, the room filled with the murmur of refined voices, the clink of glasses, and the subtle scent of roasted herbs wafting from the kitchens. I focused on breathing steadily, reminding myself of Sophia's words earlier that day. You're not just going to survive this, you're going to shine. But shining felt impossible under the weight of all those appraising glances. The first course arrived, a delicate soup I couldn't quite identify, its steam carrying hints of truffle and cream. I watched others discreetly, picking up the correct spoon from the array of utensils that seemed designed to intimidate. Conversation swirled around topics far from my world, stock portfolios fluctuating like weather patterns, boarding schools with names that evoked ivy-covered legacies, vacation homes in places like the Amalfi Coast or Aspen that I'd only read about in magazines. I stayed silent at first, sipping my wine sparingly, the rich burgundy coating my tongue with notes of blackberry and oak, but each taste only heightened my awareness of being an outsider. Alexander tried to draw me in, explaining a reference to a recent merger or asking my thoughts on a piece of modern art one guest mentioned, but his efforts only spotlighted the gap, making me feel like an exhibit rather than a participant. Then Maxwell's voice cut through, sharp as a knife. So, Miss Miller, he said, his eyes locking onto mine across the table, Alexander tells me you work in a coffee shop. The chatter quieted, attention shifting like a tide. I set my spoon down carefully, the metal cool against my fingers. Yes, sir, Maple Street Cafe, it helps pay for my education. He arched a brow, swirling his wine. And what exactly are you studying? Something practical, I assume. His tone implied doubt, as if anything I pursued couldn't measure up. Graphic design, I replied, keeping my voice even. I'll graduate next spring. Graphic design? Making posters and such. Alexander interjected smoothly. Actually, Father, Jacqueline's work focuses on brand identity and digital marketing. Extremely talented. Maxwell ignored him, pressing on. And where are you from originally? A small town in Ohio, Millfield. Never heard of it. He sipped his wine, then added, What does your father do? The question landed like a trap, and from the gleam in his eyes he sensed it. Alexander tensed beside me, his leg brushing mine under the table. My father left when I was young, I said steadily. My mother raised my sister and me alone. And her occupation? Retail now, before that, cleaning houses, waiting tables, whatever it took. A murmur from Eleanor down the table. A strong woman. But Maxwell's lip curled slightly. Indeed, from service work to service work through the generations. Fascinating. Alexander's fork clattered louder than intended. Jacqueline's mother made incredible sacrifices. She should be admired, not condescended to. The second course, seared scallops on a bed of greens, arrived, pausing the exchange, but the air thickened with unspoken tension. Alexander's hand found mine under the table, his squeeze a silent apology, grounding me as I fought the urge to shrink. As courses progressed, each more elaborate, from poached lobster to herb-crusted foie gras, Maxwell circled back with more probes, his questions veiled daggers. Did you attend university right after high school, or discover your intellectual curiosity later? That's an interesting accent. Is it common in Ohio? Have you traveled to Europe? When I admitted no, he sighed. A pity. Travel educates those with limited cultural exposure. Each barb chipped at my composure, reinforcing the message. You don't belong. By the main course, a perfectly pink beef tenderloin with truffle sauce, my nerves were raw, my appetite gone. Reaching for my wine, my hand trembled slightly, knocking the glass. A few drops splashed onto the white tablecloth, staining like blood. I'm so sorry, I gasped, heat flooding my face as a server hurried over. No harm, Alexander murmured, but Maxwell chuckled coldly. Careful, that wine costs more than you make in a week. Silence blanketed the table. Alexander flushed. Father, that's enough. Maxwell leaned back. Merely stating facts, son. No need for sensitivity. His eyes fixed on me. Is that dress from this season's collection? I don't recall it in my wife's wardrobe. The insult was blatant, guests averting eyes in discomfort. My cheeks burned, but I held steady. It belongs to a friend. She lent it for tonight. Ah, borrowed finery. I thought as much. Alexander half rose. I won't sit here while you insult her. Maxwell waved him down. If she's to enter this world, she needs thicker skin. Something snapped inside me then, a quiet resolve bubbling up from years of being overlooked, of scraping by with dignity and tact. My skin is plenty thick, Mr. Blackwood, I said calmly. It had to be, growing up as I did. His eyes narrowed, voice dropping but carrying. Let me be clear, Miss Miller. My son may be amused by slumming it with you, but your street garbage in a borrowed dress, you'll never belong here. The room froze, 23 pairs of eyes on me. Evelyn staring at her plate, Victoria gaping, Alexander raging. My blood iced, time slowing as Maxwell savored his cruelty. But instead of breaking, a calm washed over me, drawing from every underestimation I'd faced, from my mom's endless shifts to my own late-night struggles. I rose slowly, smoothing the silk, a smile forming as I prepared to shatter his world. The room remained suspended in that heavy silence, forks hovering mid-air, breaths held as if the slightest sound might shatter the crystal. Maxwell's smug satisfaction radiated across the table, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of my defeat, expecting tears or a hasty retreat. Instead, I stood tall, my fingers smoothing the midnight blue silk once more, the fabric cool and reassuring against my skin. I reached for my water glass, the condensation slick under my touch, and took a deliberate sip, the cool liquid steadying the fire building inside me. Setting it down with care, I met his gaze head-on, my voice clear and unwavering in the pin-drop quiet. Street garbage. What an interesting choice of words, Mr. Blackwood. I paused, letting the phrase hang, my eyes sweeping the table to connect briefly with the stunned guests, some averting their stares, others leaning forward in morbid fascination. I want to thank you, actually. I've been grappling with a moral dilemma for months, and you've just made my decision remarkably easy. Maxwell's expression flickered, the smugness cracking into confusion. What are you babbling about? Alexander, still half out of his chair, looked at me with a mix of concern and bewilderment, his hand hovering as if to pull me back down. But I continued, drawing from that deep well of resilience forged in my Ohio upbringing, where every setback had taught me to stand firmer. Alexander believes I only work at the coffee shop. That's partly true. I do mornings there. But for the past 2 years, I've also been a part-time investigative journalist for the Boston Sentinel. A ripple of whispers circled the table like a gathering wind, forks clinking nervously as hands set them down. Maxwell's knuckles whitened around his own glass, but his face stayed a mask of control, though I spotted the subtle twitch in his jaw. Victoria's eyes widened, darting between us, while Evelyn's fingers tightened on her napkin. 6 months ago, before I met your son, I was on a team probing corporate fraud in the shipping industry. I went on, my tone measured, each word chosen like a brushstroke in one of my designs. Precise, impactful. A name kept surfacing in our documents. Yours, Mr. Blackwood. Now the color began to drain from his cheeks, a slow bleed that satisfied something primal in me after his barrage of insults. Beside me, Alexander went rigid, his breath catching. Our investigation uncovered evidence that Blackwood Industries has been systematically falsifying environmental compliance reports for its cargo fleet. We documented illegal waste dumping in protected marine areas, carbon emissions wildly exceeding reported figures, and a network of bribes to inspectors in at least 3 countries, complete with timestamps, signatures, and wire transfers. The silence had shifted from shock to electric, charged with disbelief. Henry Blackwood's face darkened, his hands folding tightly, while Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest, her warm eyes now clouded with dismay. A cousin muttered something under his breath, and down the table a business associate shifted uncomfortably, perhaps wondering about their own ties to the company. When I realized who Alexander was, I continued, turning slightly to him, my voice softening for a moment, I faced an impossible choice. I disclosed the relationship to my editor immediately and stepped back from the story. I even pushed to delay publication while we verified more sources. I leaned forward just a fraction, locking eyes with Maxwell again, the air between us thick with unspoken accusations. I did that out of respect for Alexander, because I fell in love with him, not his family, not his wealth. I didn't want potential wrongdoing to poison what we had, and I kept it from him to avoid putting him in an untenable spot between loyalty and truth. Alexander turned fully to me now, his expression a storm of shock, hurt, and dawning realization. "Jacqueline, is this true?" he whispered, his voice raw. I nodded, brushing his hand lightly. "I'm sorry I kept it secret. I was trying to protect you and the investigation's integrity." Maxwell's flush had turned to a dangerous red, his chair scraping as he half stood. "This is preposterous. Wild accusations with no proof. I'll sue you and that rag for defamation." I smiled calmly, unflinching, the calm born from knowing the facts were ironclad, gathered through sleepless nights, poring over leaked emails and shadowed meetings I'd documented myself. "You're welcome to try. The Sentinel's lawyers have vetted everything. Photographs of you on your yacht with those officials, signed documents authorizing the falsifications, audio from executive calls discussing how to bury the toxic waste trails." A glass shattered further down the table, someone's grip failing in the tension. Why would they listen to a coffee shop girl? Maxwell spat, his composure cracking. Because the evidence I gathered was the cornerstone of the piece, and because seasoned journalists with Pulitzers in their pockets backed my call to hold for accuracy. It was a slight stretch. My mentor had the Pulitzer, not me, but he'd championed my delay, trusting my judgment after years of my dogged reporting. Growing up with nothing taught me to work harder, to pursue truth no matter the odds. I switched to graphic design for passion, but journalism never left me. The barista gig just gave me flexibility. Reaching into my clutch for my phone, the small purse a stark contrast to the opulent setting, I typed swiftly while speaking. "So, thank you for clarifying my path, Mr. Blackwood." That was a text to my editor, lifting my objection. "The story runs in tomorrow's print and online at midnight, with your name in the headline." Chaos erupted then, chairs scraping, voices overlapping in a cacophony of alarm. Maxwell lunged forward, face twisted in fury. "You little nothing, do you know who you're dealing with? I'll destroy you." Alexander surged up, stepping between us protectively. "Enough, father, you won't speak to her like that." Maxwell hissed at him. "Fool, she used you to infiltrate us." I shook my head firmly. "No, I fell in love despite your connection, not because of it. When I learned who he was, I stepped away to avoid any conflict." Evelyn finally spoke, her voice tight. "Surely you can't believe this over your father." Alexander met my eyes, searching, then turned to Maxwell. "I've questioned those environmental reports for years, father, been told to stay in my lane." I believe her. Maxwell's face purpled with rage. Ungrateful boy. Everything I've built, your inheritance, and you side with this nobody? Her name is Jacqueline, Alexander said steadily. And yes. Guests began slipping away, murmuring excuses, the room emptying like sand through fingers. Victoria edged closer, her shock mingling with a spark of admiration. Well, this tops every family dinner ever. Henry rose slowly. Maxwell, my office, now. As Maxwell stormed out, Evelyn trailing, I turned to Alexander. I should go. He insisted on driving, but I shook my head. Your family needs you tonight. This will be hard for everyone. We need to talk, he pleaded. Tomorrow, I promised, if you still want. Eleanor approached as I gathered my things, taking my hands. While I'm not thrilled about tomorrow's headlines, you showed courage no one's mustered against Maxwell in years. I swallowed. I'm sorry the celebration's ruined. She smiled sadly. 60 years of marriage teaches that truth trumps comfortable lies. Leaving the mansion, head high, I declined Alexander's offers again, the taxi pulling away as the grand estate faded, leaving me to wonder if truth had cost me love. The taxi's headlights cut through the rainy night, the estate's lights dimming in the rearview mirror like a fading nightmare. But the ache in my chest grew sharper with every mile. Tears finally spilled over as I leaned against the cool window, not from Maxwell's venom or the stares of his elite circle, but from the fear that my stand for truth had severed the one genuine bond I'd found in years. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a message from my editor. Got your text. Running the story at midnight. Are you okay? My fingers trembled as I replied, yes, it was the right decision. But doubt gnawed at me. Had I protected Alexander, or betrayed him by hiding the investigation so long? The city lights blurred into streaks, mirroring the chaos in my mind, where memories of our sunset walks clashed with the evening's wreckage. I hadn't slept a wink by morning, my small apartment feeling even tinier under the weight of what I'd unleashed. After hours on the phone with my editor and the paper's lawyers, triple-checking every fact, quote, and image, the story went live at midnight. I refreshed the Sentinel's site obsessively, watching the headline blaze across the screen. Blackwood Industries' environmental fraud and corruption exposed. My byline sat alongside two senior reporters, the article laying bare years of violations, falsified reports on emissions, illegal dumping in fragile ecosystems, bribes funneled through shell companies. It included grainy photos I'd snapped of Maxwell's yacht meetings, excerpts from incriminating memos, and anonymous quotes from insiders who'd risk everything to speak. As dawn broke, gray and unrelenting, national outlets picked it up, headlines screaming from CNBC to the New York Times. By 8 a.m., Blackwood stock had dipped 15%, forums buzzing with speculation. My phone rang nonstop, colleagues with congratulations, my editor offering a full-time gig, even rival papers dangling job offers. Sophia texted, "You badass! Saw the news. Drinks on me?" Elaine called, her voice fierce with pride. "You did the right thing, sis. That monster deserved it, and you're standing up for everyone he's crushed." But through the praise, a hollow pit formed in my stomach. Innocent employees would suffer, layoffs looming as the company scrambled. I pictured families like mine scraping by, now facing uncertainty because of executive greed I'd helped expose. "Why does it feel awful?" I asked Elaine, staring at the rain-slicked street below. "Because you're human," she said. "Doing right often hurts, but silence would have cost your soul." Still, no call from Alexander, his silence a wound deeper than Maxwell's words. Had he read it? Did he hate me for the secret, or worse, for being right? 3 days later, with the scandal dominating headlines, the EPA launching probes, the DOJ hinting at charges, I dragged myself back to the cafe. My manager greeted me with wide eyes. "Saw your byline. Reporters have been sniffing around. Sure you want to be here?" I tied on my apron, the familiar routine anchor. I need normalcy, and I don't quit without notice. The morning blurred into coffee pours and order calls, customers stealing glances, some whispering recognition. Around 11, the door chimed and the cafe hushed. Maxwell Blackwood strode in, his once imposing frame haggard, suit rumpled, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. No entourage, no aura of command, just a man diminished by his own unraveling. He scanned the room, locking on me behind the counter. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, voice steadier than my racing heart. "What can I get you?" A word, in private. My manager stepped up protectively. If you're here to harass... It's fine, I cut in. I'll take my break. We claimed a corner table, away from prying ears, the aroma of fresh brews clashing with the tension. He sat heavily, studying me like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Have you come to threaten me? I asked quietly, folding my hands to hide their shake. He exhaled slowly. I underestimated you. Most do. It's my burden and advantage. His lawyers, he admitted stiffly, deemed the story airtight, a lawsuit futile and attention-drawing. Is that an admission? His jaw clenched. An acknowledgement of your thoroughness. The board's put me on leave pending investigations. I nodded, unflinching. Did you come to compliment my work? To ask what it'll take to back off? Money? A job? Name it. Disbelief surged through me. You still don't get it. This wasn't about gain, it was about truth. Accountability for the powerful who think rules don't apply. He scoffed. Truth? Do you know the cost? Hundreds of jobs a company my father built, crumbling. That's on you, I countered, leaning in. On every choice for profit over planet, over people. Dumping waste that poisons waters, bribing to hide it. Those are your sins, not mine. For the first time, he looked almost reflective, studying me with reluctant respect. You believe you're the hero here, don't you? I believe in consequences, especially for those who evade them. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. My son's not been home in days. His mother's distraught. Whatever game you're playing. I love Alexander, I interrupted. No game. And I haven't heard from him. A flicker crossed his face. Vulnerability, perhaps regret. He was always too idealistic like my father. Without more, he left, the door chiming his exit. The cafe buzzed back to life, but I felt unmoored, his words stirring fresh worry for Alexander. Where was he? Had the truth shattered him too? That evening, as I chopped vegetables in my kitchen, a knock echoed, soft, tentative. My heart leaped as I opened the door to Alexander. Unshaven, eyes weary, carrying the weight of betrayal and loss. We stood there in the narrow hallway of my apartment, the door clicking shut behind him, the faint scent of rain on his coat mingling with the garlic from my half-prepared dinner simmering on the stove. His eyes, usually so bright, were shadowed with exhaustion, lines etched deeper around them, as if the past 3 days had aged him a decade. Do you want some water? Or coffee? I offered, my voice barely above a whisper, needing something to do with my hands to mask the tremor. He shook his head, glancing around the familiar space. The worn couch where we'd shared so many quiet evenings, the stack of my design sketches on the coffee table, as if seeing it all anew through the lens of betrayal. We moved to the living room, the floorboards creaking under our steps, and sat on opposite ends of the sofa, a careful distance between us that felt like a chasm. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words, until we both blurted out at the same time. I should have told you. I should have called. A faint smile ghosted across his face, breaking the tension just a fraction. Ladies first. I drew in a shaky breath, twisting my fingers in my lap, the roughness of my cuticles a small distraction from the knot in my throat. I should have told you about the investigation from the start. I convinced myself it was to protect you, to keep you out of that impossible spot between family and right and wrong. But honestly, I was terrified. If I said it out loud, it would all come crashing down, and I'd lose you. My words tumbled out, laced with the regret I'd carried since that first Google search of his family name, when the pieces had started falling into place. He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor, processing. And I should have called sooner. I needed time to wrap my head around it all, to dig into the evidence myself, to face my father. Did you? I asked, leaning forward slightly, the couch cushion dipping under my weight. He ran a hand through his messy hair, exhaling heavily. Yes. The evidence is damning, Jacqueline. More than even your article covered. I pulled files from the company servers, things buried deep, emails about covering tracks, even internal audits that were doctored before submission. My whole life I idolized him. I knew he was tough, ruthless in business, but I thought there was integrity underneath. Turns out, it was all smoke and mirrors. His voice cracked on the last word, and I ached to reach out, but held back, giving him space. We talked about the dinner then, how his father's words had been the final straw, but how my revelation had ripped open wounds he'd ignored for years. I saw the reports myself over time, he admitted, questioned the numbers, but he always shut me down. Mind your division, he'd say. I let it go because… family. I gestured vaguely toward the kitchen, but we stayed put, the conversation pulling us deeper. Where have you been these past days? I pressed gently, needing to understand the void his silence had left. A hotel downtown mostly. Meeting with company lawyers in secret, poring over documents, talking with grandfather about what comes next for Blackwood Industries, and thinking endlessly about us. My heart constricted at that, a mix of hope and fear swirling in my chest like the steam from my abandoned dinner. What did you conclude? He finally looked up, his blue eyes meeting mine, raw and vulnerable. That I fell in love with someone braver than I ever realized. Someone who stood up when I should have years ago. I'm angry, yeah, that you didn't trust me with the truth. But I get why. You were caught in the middle, and you chose to shield me. Relief washed over me, warm and tentative, but I had to voice it. I'm so sorry, Alexander. For the secret, for the pain it's caused your family. He shifted closer, the distance shrinking as he took my hand, his palm rough from nervous clenching. And I'm sorry I didn't defend you sooner at that table, that you faced his cruelty alone before I saw him for what he is. My family's in pieces now. Mother's not speaking to me, blaming me for siding against him. Victoria's the only one who gets it. She texted me saying you were a force of nature. A small laugh escaped me at that, imagining her wry smile amid the fallout. What about the company? He sighed, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. Grandfather's stepping in as interim CEO. We're opening everything to the investigators, preparing for whatever fines or restructures come. It's going to be brutal, a long road to any kind of redemption. The weight of it all hung between us, but in his touch I felt a thread of possibility. And us? I whispered, the question hanging fragile in the air. He was quiet for a beat, then squeezed my hand. I don't know everything yet, Jacqueline. I love you. That hasn't changed, but there's hurt on both sides. Trust to mend. My eyes stung with unshed tears, fearing the end, but he continued softly. I'm not walking away. I'm saying we rebuild. Slowly, with no more secrets, if you're willing. The vulnerability in his voice mirrored my own, and I nodded, shifting to close the gap, resting my head on his shoulder. More than willing. That night we talked until the sky lightened, peeling back layers of fears and hopes, the conversation a bridge over the rubble. It wasn't easy. Moments of tension flared when he pressed on why I'd delayed the story, or when I admitted my guilt over the innocent lives upended, but each honest exchange knit us closer. As dawn filtered through the curtains, casting soft gold on his tired face, I realized this was the true exposure. Not just the fraud, but our raw selves, vulnerable and real. The scandal's storm was just beginning. But in that quiet morning, we found the first steps toward healing. 6 months blurred by in a haze of headlines and hearings, the Blackwood scandal escalating into one of the year's biggest corporate takedowns, with my initial expose igniting a firestorm that refused to die down. Federal agencies swarmed in, the EPA dissecting environmental breaches, the DOJ building cases on fraud and bribery, resulting in fines that topped $300 million, a staggering sum that made even the opulent estate seem fragile. Maxwell faced indictment, his court date splashed across news feeds, while other executives scattered like leaves in the wind, some turning state's evidence to save their skins. The company's stock, once a pillar of stability, cratered nearly 40%. Divisions sold off in frantic restructures, leaving hundreds of workers in limbo, families uprooted, savings wiped out. I watched it unfold from my apartment, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows as I scrolled through updates, each one a reminder of the human cost behind the justice. Guilt gnawed at me relentlessly, a constant companion during those early weeks, as I pictured the faces of those innocent employees, clerks, engineers, dock workers, who'd had no hand in the deceit but now paid the price. One night, staring at the ceiling as rain pattered against my window, I confessed it all to Alexander over a late call. I know it was right, exposing the lies, but what about the collateral? People like my mom, grinding through life, now out of work because of what I started. His voice came soft through the speaker, steadying me. You didn't start this. My father's choices did. You shone a light. The rot was already there. Still, the weight pressed on, turning sleep into a battleground of what-ifs. To channel it, I pitched a follow-up series to The Sentinel 3 months in, focusing on the ripple effects of corporate fraud, the displaced lives, the scarred ecosystems, the slow path to recovery. They greenlit it with a team and budget, and I dove in, interviewing former Blackwood staff who'd lost homes to foreclosure, scientists cataloging polluted coastlines where fish populations had plummeted, community organizers rallying for cleanup funds. Each story humanized the abstract, like the welder from a Boston suburb who shared his layoff letter over coffee, his hands calloused from years on the docks. "We trusted the bosses," he said, voice thick with betrayal. "Now my kid's college fund is gone." Or the marine biologist wading through tainted waters, her data showing toxin levels that would linger for decades. I wove in hope too, profiles of companies that had reformed post-scandal, job training programs for the unemployed, grassroots efforts restoring habitats. Every piece ended with action steps. Donate here, volunteer there, pressure lawmakers for stricter oversight. The series garnered attention, pulling in awards nominations and speaking invites. But more importantly, it eased my conscience, turning regret into purpose. My career surged, offers from national outlets, a book deal to expand the reporting into a full exposé on accountability in big business. I even testified before a congressional subcommittee, my voice echoing in the marbled hall as I detailed enforcement gaps, the borrowed dress long replaced by a sharp suit that felt like armor. Meanwhile, Alexander charted his own course away from the family shadow, resigning from Blackwood Industries in a move that sent shockwaves through boardrooms. He liquidated personal assets, stocks, a vacation property he'd rarely used, to seed a foundation promoting ethical practices and environmental restoration, hiring displaced workers where he could. "I can't erase what happened," he told me one crisp autumn evening as we strolled the harbor, the water lapping gently against the piers, salted air crisp in our lungs. "But I can build something better from the ashes." His days stretched long, filled with grant proposals and partnerships, but the fire in his eyes was new, fueled by conviction rather than obligation. Our relationship mended in fits and starts, those first months a delicate dance of rebuilding trust. We'd meet in neutral spots, parks, quiet cafes to unpack the hurt, my secrecy, his family's denial. Arguments flared, like the night he questioned why I'd waited so long to publish, his frustration spilling over in raised voices. But we always circled back to honesty, ending with apologies and tentative embraces. The Blackwood family fractured further, fissures widening under the scandal's pressure. Evelyn stood by Maxwell like a sentinel, her public appearances at his side a mask of stoic loyalty, but she cut Alexander off, her calls going unanswered. Victoria emerged as our unexpected bridge, sneaking lunches with us, her wit a balm. "You popped the impunity bubble," she confided over salads one afternoon, her laugh genuine. "About time someone did." Henry and Eleanor surprised us most, extending an olive branch with a private lunch invitation a month after the story broke. Seated in their sunlit sunroom overlooking gardens now tinged with fall colors, Henry spoke gravely. "We founded this on principles, profit with purpose. Maxwell lost that. You forced the mirror." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Painful but necessary. It might save what's left." Their support bolstered Alexander, easing his isolation. As winter approached, our bond solidified, small rituals returning, movie nights on my sofa, walks where we'd dream aloud about futures untainted by legacy. The pain lingered, scars from secrets and slights, but in sharing them, we grew stronger, our love tempered like steel and fire. 8 months after that explosive dinner, with the trial looming like a dark cloud over the remnants of Blackwood Industries, I found myself in a sterile conference room at Maxwell's attorney's office, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and stale coffee from a nearby pot. Alexander had insisted on coming, his presence a solid anchor beside me as we faced his father across the table, flanked by lawyers in crisp suits who eyed us warily. Maxwell looked smaller than I remembered, his once commanding frame hunched slightly, the arrogance stripped away by months of legal battles and public scrutiny, leaving behind a man grappling with his fall from grace. When he spoke, his voice lacked the booming authority, replaced by a gravelly resignation that hinted at nights spent staring at ceilings much like I had. "I underestimated you, Miss Miller," he began, folding his hands on the table, the gold cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. "A mistake I won't repeat." "Why did you want this meeting?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral, though my pulse quickened at the unexpected vulnerability in his eyes. He glanced between Alexander and me, the room silent save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. To admit I was wrong, not about the business decisions. I still believe they were necessary for growth, tough calls in a cutthroat world. He paused, clearing his throat. But wrong about you. You're not what I called you that night. It was the closest he'd come to an apology, his pride allowing no more, but in that admission I saw a crack in the facade, a reluctant nod to the strength he'd tried to crush. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting the moment hang. And I was wrong about you too, son, Maxwell continued, addressing Alexander directly. I saw your idealism as weakness. These months have shown me it's something else, maybe strength I never had. Alexander's response was measured. Is that all, father? Maxwell nodded, a hollow chuckle escaping. Lawyers expect a plea deal. Time served, perhaps. From boardrooms to cells, quite the descent. As we left, the elevator descending smoothly, Alexander took my hand, his grip firm. You okay? I think so, I replied, the weight lifting slightly. That was as close to sorry as he'll get. Close as a door. In the years following that night of being labeled street garbage, my life had blossomed in ways I couldn't have foreseen, the humiliation of forge that tempered my resolve. My journalism career exploded. Major publications courting me with feature assignments, the book deal turning my series into a bestseller on corporate ethics. Even invitations to speak at universities where I'd once dreamed of studying full-time. I testified in more hearings, my voice steady as I advocated for reforms. The coffee shop shifts a distant memory, replaced by a home office overlooking the Charles River, sketches and notepads scattered amid research files. The barista who'd scrimped for textbooks now mentored young reporters, sharing how adversity could fuel purpose. But the deepest shifts were within, that nagging insecurity about my roots giving way to unshakable confidence. Knowing my value stemmed from actions, not origins or others' approval. Standing up had cost, sleepless nights, strained ties, but silence would have eroded my soul far more. Alexander and I claimed a cozy apartment together, modest by his old standards but ours, filled with laughter over shared meals and debates on everything from design trends to environmental policy. His foundation thrived, expanding to fund restoration projects in those polluted areas, employing more former staff, his passion, a daily inspiration. We'd return to that Italian restaurant for our 1-year mark, the candlelight flickering as he reached for my hand. Grandmother said something recently, he murmured. The measure of a person isn't possessions, but what they stand for, fight for, I smiled. Wise woman. She also said when you find someone who inspires your best self, hold on. He squeezed my fingers. You did, standing against my father, holding up that mirror to our flaws, giving me courage to forge my path. And you stood with me, I reminded, when it could have been easier to turn away. Later, along the river where love had first bloomed, he stopped under the stars. Father called you garbage and borrowed finery, but you showed true class, integrity that wealth can't buy. We reflected on lessons learned. Empires on deceit crumble, relationships on truth endure. The path had scarred, but led to authenticity. That dinner taught our worth defines not by judgments, but integrity in fire. Moments forcing stands against underestimation? Share below. If this resonated, like, subscribe, share, reminder of your worth. Thanks for listening. Sometimes breakers gift greatest strength. As the echoes of that transformative night faded into the gentle rhythm of our everyday lives, I found myself often pausing by the window, watching the river's slow current carry away the remnants of old doubts. Each ripple a soft reminder that healing unfolds in quiet, unhurried waves. Alexander and I, hand in hand through the lingering shadows of scandal and renewal, discovered a deeper harmony, one woven from threads of forgiveness and shared dreams, where mornings began with coffee brewed together and evenings dissolved into conversations that stretched like the horizon, reassuring us that love, when rooted in honesty, blooms eternally against any storm. The world outside continued its spin, headlines shifting to new stories, the Blackwood name evolving under Henry's steady guidance into something more ethical, more humane. But for us, the true victory lay in the small, sacred spaces we carved. A sketchbook filled with visions of a future unbound by past chains, a foundation growing like a young tree, its branches reaching toward cleaner skies and fairer practices. Maxwell's reluctant words, though sparse, had sealed a chapter, allowing us to turn the page with grace, knowing that true worth whispers from within, not from the clamor of wealth or approval. And as I leaned against Alexander one twilight, the stars emerging like timid promises, I felt the world's vastness soften, wrapping us in its tender embrace, a quiet affirmation that from brokenness comes the most enduring light. In the end, it's the gentle persistence of truth that guides us home, murmuring softly that we are, and always were, enough.